Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the view from the opposition. This week it comes from Matt Davies from Forest Focused. Matt, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? Are you well?
I'm very well. I'm very much enjoying the football season. So, yeah, good to be back with you, mate.
I can see the smile on your face. For those listening, Matt is grinning from ear to ear. And if you remember seeing Matt previously on the podcast, I don't think he was smiling as much as he is. And it's all probably down to the fact that Forest are flying high in the Premier League. Third, did you quite expect that at the start of the season?
No, no one could really, could they? I mean, I do know, I think a lot of the pundits and the wider media, the national media, predicted us to finish, 17th or in the relegation zone, that kind of stuff. I think locally, we never really thought that. We thought we made some good signings. I'm sure we'll come on to Elliott Anderson and players like that. And we thought we could aim for that kind of 12th to 14th position, which we might still end up in, to be fair. No, I'm not getting carried away, but that would be a great season. So, but to be third after 10 games, having played some of the better sides as well, it's fantastic. And unexpected. And, just enjoying the ride and not getting too carried away, hopefully.
And you look at how they've performed this season, again, looking from the outside in, it doesn't seem like it's luck. It's earned. You guys are there because you've actually played really well, conceded only 7 goals this season. Only Liverpool have conceded less with 6. How has Nuno got it so right? Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't think he'd be in charge at Forest. I thought he would come in, keep you up by the skin of your teeth, and then he would go and you'd replace him with some other manager. But my goodness me, he seems to be working absolute miracles.
Yeah, I think last season when he came in, the performances were probably better than the results, and the statistics for people who buy into that around defensive numbers were really good. We just kept conceding either silly goals that teams at the bottom concede, or more particularly set piece goals. We couldn't defend corners. I think we conceded 23 goals in 38 games from set pieces. And then there's probably 2 things that happened. Nuno was retained, as you say, and had that whole pre-season, which Forest managers don't always get. And that made a big difference for him to get his ideas across. Like, you speak to ex-players and current players, and they'll say the same thing. And the second thing is kind of obvious, but we signed a big, nasty centre-half who will just head the ball and win every battle in Nikola Milenkovic, and gave us a much better foundation. And a few other good bits of recruitment, Alex Moreno, Elliott Anderson, obviously. Those kind of players have come in and just made us better. And I think, there was games last season when Nuno was trying to utilise his bench and things were going wrong, and now we've got more depth. So those are probably the main things. But yeah, Nuno's really. There was quite a few doubts about Nuno towards the end of last season, to be fair, because we did finish 17th, and we were probably lucky that the 3 that went down were really awful, like genuinely terrible. But he's rewarded the faith of the ownership massively, and his stock is sky high again, as high as it was when he was taking Wolves into Europe, I think.
Yeah, he's doing an absolutely fantastic job. And it might seem strange saying this, and this isn't meant as any disrespect to Nottingham Forest, but saying this as a podcaster and as a fan of the supposedly richest club in the world, I look at Forest's squad and I'm envious of it, because you have such a wealth of attacking talent, but defensively as well. You've mentioned the centre back there, but you've got Murillo as well as the partner at the back. I look at them and there's such a threat kind of all over the pitch with the roles that they've got to do. I mean, who am I looking out for in particular?
Well, I think we've got. I mean, it sounds kind of simple, but we've got a lot of square pegs and square holes suddenly. And Forest haven't had that. Obviously, we signed so many players when we came up, and we've kind of rectified that and trimmed down the squad. And we've got the solid back 4. We've got the pace out wide. We've got 2 battling midfielders. We've got a really good number 10 in Gibbs White, who obviously Newcastle like, and Elanga Newcastle like as well. And then Chris Wood up front, who. The attack's built for. It's not built around, but it's built for him, and he's scoring tons of goals. So I think Hudson-Odoi and Elanga are probably going to be really important in this game. You've got 2 young fullbacks who are very talented, and I'm sure they're very good in Hall and Livramento. Elanga absolutely destroyed Dan Burn last time, and Hall and Burn are totally different players. But can Hall cope with the pace of Elanga and the trickery? Elanga got a West Ham player sent off last weekend just through pace, so that'll be an interesting battle. And then Hudson-Odoi, he's a bit like Ian Robin. You know what he's going to do. He's going to try and cut in. He's going to try and bend the ball into the top corner. But equally, he will go outside his man a couple of times out of 10 just to keep him honest. So can Livramento be on his game for 90 minutes to quieten down Hudson-Odoi, and then can Morgan Gibbs-White win that battle as the number 10? If it's him or if it's Elliott Anderson, that's a big point of discussion. Those are probably the three that decide, from our point of view, if we can win the game. And then I would back us to restrict Newcastle, not necessarily keep a clean sheet, but I'd be surprised if we conceded more than one goal just based on current form. Obviously, you guys have got Gordon and Isak are elite Premier League players, so they're going to test anyone. But yeah, it should be a really good game and a really close game. They've always been good games between us and Newcastle. Even when you've beaten us, they've been entertaining and they've been tight. It was only the kind of freak Chris Wood blowout game at St James's Park where we won comfortably. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
That was the last time you were on the podcast, actually, was previewing that game. And I think I said I left that episode feeling very buoyed because you came in a bit of a depressive mood, if I'm not mistaken. And then obviously we were shocked by Chris Wood's performance on Boxing Day. But you mentioned there the battle of the flanks. And I said this on the match preview with John Gibson. That is where, for me, the game is won and lost. And had Arsenal got the better of Livramento and Lewis Hall last weekend at St James's Park, I would be fully backing Hudson-Odoi and Elanga to do the same. But they played so well up against Martinelli and Saka, and that is going to give them such a boost going into this game. I think Forest is actually a bigger task than Arsenal because of the form and the confidence. But I think Livramento and Hall will be, hopefully, fingers crossed, able to keep both Elanga and Hudson-Odoi quiet. I just can't get over the cost of Hudson-Odoi, though, because he seems like he's such a talented player, and things went a little bit astray at Chelsea. But I mean, the fees reported what, 3.5 to 6 million, something like that. It's not very large, is it?
No, it's between 3 and 5, I think. I don't know, but I think there's probably a pretty decent sell-on clause in there for Chelsea to recoup something. But he came in as a sort of a reclamation project. He'd been really good for Chelsea, and then he'd had a big ACL injury and hadn't quite got back. But he'd not had a run of games. So when he came to us, it was probably his first opportunity to play consistent Premier League football for a few years. And we showed faith in him and he's rewarded it. I think it was massively. He got, I think, 8 goals last season. I think it was only 1 assist, but he scored some big goals. He's already done that, obviously, at Anfield this season for probably the win that got the ball properly rolling for us, and then came up again with a goal against West Ham last week. So he's only got 1 year left on his contract after this season, which is a big concern because I think someone will come in for him. And it's the case of do we need to cash in or can we persuade him to stay? But right now, as we record this, the England squad's announced at 2 p.m. I don't think he'll be in it, but he's just starting to make a case again, having won England caps as a very young player. So he's fit and flying. So many of our players are. It's just that time where, a couple of players get into form, then a couple more, then a couple more, and suddenly your whole 11's in form and the players are coming off the bench and making impacts. And I don't believe it'll be like this all season. But if ever you're playing a team at the wrong time from Newcastle's point of view, then it's certainly now.
Yeah, I mean it's quite something that I think if you look back over the last couple of years, if you ask someone about the star player of Nottingham Forest, the one to watch, most people would have gone Morgan Gibbs-White. But now you ask that question, and I'm going to ask you the question. You could say one of 5, 6, 7 players is the one to watch. I mean, you already mentioned Chris Wood, Elliott Anderson. So go on. I mean, who is the one to watch this Sunday?
I suppose I've got to say Chris Wood. If he asked me to pick one, because he's got 8 goals already in this season. But it's not a flash in the pan. I mean, we signed him from you guys. Obviously, he started really slowly under Steve Cooper, then got an injury and missed the end of the season. But since Nuno's come in, only Haaland and Palmer have scored more goals than him consistently. That's going back quite a while now. And, if you look at Premier League strikers right now, just on current form, solely on current form, I'm not saying he is the best player, but to me, right now, I know a lot of Newcastle fans won't agree with this, but I would say he's the second best striker in the league right now on form. Over a season, then I'm sure you say Isak's a £100 million player or whatever. But he is right on his game. He's scoring different kinds of goals as well. I don't know if people saw the game against Leicester where he got the ball into feet, turned sharply, and hit it in the bottom corner. Score and then kind of the more meat and drink goals like the one he got against West Ham at the weekend. So he is really hard to stop, and his chance conversion is crazy. Like the amount of efficiency. He doesn't get loads of shots. We're not creating tons of chances for him, but they're big chances when we generally do, and he'll take them, and then he'll add a couple of others that aren't big chances. So yeah, he's the one to watch for me. But like you say, both wingers. Morgan Gibbs-White came back from injury and set up a goal last week. Elliott Anderson's been like sensational. We probably didn't know enough about him when he signed as Forest fans, and he's opened our eyes immediately to how good he is. And then the fullbacks will get forwards. They've got a goal in them. Olarena scored a screamer at the weekend. So I could go across the team, and Nikola Milenkovic should have scored a couple of goals. Yeah, there's lots of players to watch, I would say, right now.
That's my biggest concern is Chris Wood up against Fabian Schär and Dan Burn. I'm not too concerned about the fullbacks because I know what they can do. We've seen what they can do against two of the best wingers in the league in Martinelli and Saka. But it's the battle between Chris Wood and whoever's tasked with marking that has really kept me awake this week because our centre backs are not in form. Fabian Schär doesn't look like he's his old self, and Dan Burn obviously, although he was playing left back, had the nightmare of Boxing Day last season, and he's probably as well just dropped off a little bit. So yeah, and as we say, Chris Wood's in the form of his career as well. So if you're asking me who I'm backing in a battle there, I'm backing Chris Wood, unfortunately. But that being said, Newcastle United come into this game having defended really well against Arsenal. Their performances have been good over the last few weeks, and now we're starting to see the results match the performances, which is really, really important. Let's talk about Elliott Anderson then. A sale that no one expected to happen in the summer, but Newcastle United were forced into it because of the PSR rules and a potential threat of a points deduction. Elliott Anderson didn't want to go, but he understood the need for his exit. It's worked really well for him because a lot of Newcastle United fans, even though they say, I wish he hadn't gone, we didn't want to sell him, that is true, but they also accept that he probably wouldn't have been first team choice. He would have been on the bench, getting limited minutes. So it's worked out really nicely for him that he's gone to a side where he is in the first team and playing week in, week out. I mean, how impressed have you been with him?
Oh, unbelievably. I think we saw him pre-season really early on, but even then we weren't sure he'd start the first league game. It wasn't a surprise. It was interesting that he got the nod and he was in. And what I really like about him, I'm sure Newcastle fans have seen all this stuff, obviously, but he will take the ball anywhere under pressure and retain it and move it on. He's like a proper modern midfielder because you could play him as a 6 even. Might not be his best position, or a number 8 or a number 10. He could do a job out wide. He can do the defensive side of the game. He can be creative, but he's just a bit of an all-rounder, which is why I think he'll make it into the England squad sooner rather than later if he keeps playing like this. The only downside for him is that all the other midfielders are now in such form that he had a knock going into last weekend, and it kind of forced him to be on the bench and just play 30 minutes. And obviously, coming off a 3-0 win. The question is, do you bring him back into the team straight away against his former club, or do you leave him on the bench and make him an impact sub again? And obviously a fantastic position for Nuno to be in, but he's been absolutely exceptional. Like, he's on some set pieces as well when Ilanga's not on the pitch, or James Ward-Prowse, or I haven't even mentioned who was a good solid signing. He's not near the team at the moment. So yeah, Elliott Anderson's so impressive. I mean, the figures around the deal are interesting. Obviously, you got the Codimos out of it. I don't know. I've got an idea what the final net spend on Elliott Anderson was, but he's worth way more than what we signed him for already, and it's only November. So I can see why it stings for you guys.
Yeah, I did say that to a Forest fan when he signed that, even if the down payment was £35 million, and obviously there's a bit of sums to be done with the signing of Vlachodimos, it'll prove to be a bargain, because we've seen enough of him at Newcastle United to know he's going to be a big star. He was really unfortunate that he picked up an injury last season, because that was when Newcastle's midfield really could have done with him, and he would have had opportunities to play week in, week out. In the end, it was Lewis Miley who got the nod, because Elliott Anderson picked up a freak injury and was out for so long. But yeah, such a disappointing sale from a Newcastle United point of view. I mean, what would you say to the board members at Newcastle United who are making that decision? Are you thankful for sanctioning that one?
I'm thankful on two fronts, because Vlachodimos was absolutely horrendous for us. So to get him off the books as well was certainly beneficial. So yeah, I mean, obviously, like, tongue in cheek, and massively grateful to Newcastle, but the PSR shambles that we saw over the summer, we were having to do some funky deals ourselves, but actually, they looked funky on the time. We sold 2 players to Lyon, Niakate and Mangala, for insane money. Like, I think that we got a net 55 million for them, and we thought there must be something strange in it. But I think just Lyon just overpaid. But we were very fortunate that front. But you see Villa and Chelsea doing a few deals, and it's not good for the game. I know Newcastle have so much resources that they couldn't spend. They have to sell 2 good players. I really like Minter as well, who was another player that we were interested in. So yeah, we came out of it on the right side this time. But if we're in this situation again, then we might not do. So I don't think it's good for football, certainly.
No, I agree with you. And we spoke about this on the match preview. There was a really interesting discussion on 5 Live earlier in the week about, are we going to get to the point where clubs are seriously considering just taking the hit of the points deduction and then still spending big, as Forest did? Because then when they come out the other side, as long as you survive and you don't go down, then actually haven't you been the winner in the whole situation, as Forest appear to be? I mean, that might be a bit simplistic way to put it, but what would you say to that?
Yeah, with hindsight, yes. At the time, I really didn't like getting a points deduction. But part of it was because we did overspend and we did get carried away. We were signing players, that we shouldn't have got. Like, people won't even remember that we signed Emmanuel Dennis and players like that. But with the hindsight, like I said earlier in the show there, the teams at the bottom of the Premier League last season were so poor relatively to what you see, that we sort of got away with it. 4 points was eminently manageable. I don't know about this season. Southampton are showing signs of life finally, and Ipswich are drawing games. Leicester under Cooper, they'll just find a way to get results. So I don't think you could necessarily do it this year, and it would come back to bite you, because then if you do go down, you're saddled with these players on big money contracts and stuff like that. So no, not really. But having done it, we're in a really good place and able to build. When we came up as well, and I'm going on here, sorry, we took a big gamble in signing a ton of players on pretty high wages, and if we'd gone down, then it would have been a big challenge to get back quickly and not be saddled with these players on big contracts. But I think we've got an owner who will roll the dice and will keep rolling the dice. He's gone for Edu from Arsenal, and he's very ambitious, and at the moment it's paying off.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, actually, because I didn't even know that deal was happening until it was mentioned to me yesterday. It's a fantastic show of ambition from your owner to go after Edu. And I guess when you see that happening and that ambition being shown off the pitch and in the boardroom, when you are flying high on the pitch, it's just a recipe for success, isn't it? Like, you guys are already buoyed by the results and the fantastic performances so far, sitting 3rd in the league. And then you wake up and you see the news that you're going after one of the best, the directors in the game. It must just be a fantastic time to be a Forest fan.
Oh yeah, massively. Like, when you were talking there, I kind of trying to think from a Newcastle point of view, when you had Mike Ashley running your club, and it felt like he was running it like Sports Direct, not like an ambitious Premier League club, and that must have been so painful for fans. Our owner is. Fans love him. He's a bit of a dying breed. There's no kind of Sam Hammam, Ken Bates type owners out there anymore, and he's probably as close. He's very front and center of things, and definitely wears his heart on his sleeve. He's got a tattoo with his personal motto on his arm that you can see. That he's literally a large and life character. But yeah, you just, as fans, you want a club to be ambitious, to try and reach for whatever their ceiling is and try and break through it. Obviously, we appreciate that we're not going to challenge, Man City and Liverpool and Arsenal and that kind of stuff. But if this is our moment, at least we're trying to do all we can to maximise it. And I think that's all you can really want as a Forest fan and any kind of football fan.
Yes, indeed. He's definitely a character, to say the least. But I suppose when he's your controversial character, you love him, don't you? And you let the rest of the world create the noise. This episode is brought to you by NORD VPN. You can head to nordvpn.com/tune for a very exclusive discount on your NordVPN plan. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box. Do click on it. Get yourself signed up. Get yourself protected against the hackers and the scammers out there. Protect your bank details, your passwords, your online identity. One NordVPN account can be used on up to 10 devices. It's premium cybersecurity for the price of a cup of coffee per month. Do click on it. Help support the podcast. And most importantly, get yourself secured. Right. I want to know, Matt, how Forest will approach the game, because I haven't seen a lot of them. I've just seen the stats and the results and a little bit on Match of the Day. But what are we expecting on Sunday?
First, that was an excellent ad read. I have to do those on my podcast, and you're much slicker than I am. So well done for that.
Thank you.
Well, I think we are a team that has quite low possession, like 40%. I think it's quite low in the Premier League. I think only Everton have lower. But I sort of think that those stats are a little bit irrelevant. Like you look at Southampton having 70% of the ball. It's more kind of what you do with it, and we use it very well. We sit fairly deep, but not camped on our own box. I think it's more a plan to invite teams on to leave space for Hudson-Odoi and Elanga to exploit on the counter-attack, even at home. And it worked, very well against West Ham. It was our second home win in a row. We hadn't quite found the formula at home before that. We'd drawn with Wolves, we'd drawn with Bournemouth, who are obviously a good side, looking at their results. But I think the plan is to make space for the wingers, get Gibbs White on the ball, win the ball back, and then go. That's always, exploit pace, get it out wide, make chances for Chris Wood. It sounds quite simplistic, but it is hard to stop when it works. And I think that's what we'll do. We don't mind you having the ball, and the statistics around, we have the lowest term in terms of a trigger when we press. You'll have, I think it's an average of like 17 passes or a move before we try and win the ball back. But we're happy to let you have it and then try and win it in a good area for us to exploit you. So I'm sure players like they'll let Cher have the ball, let Burn have the ball, and we don't mind that. Cher's a good footballing defender, obviously, but I think that's the way we'll probably go about it.
It's funny because every time someone on this episode says to me, "Oh, Newcastle United can have a lot of the ball and we're going to see what they can do with it," it does fill me with a little bit of fear, because I don't think Newcastle United are comfortable when they have to have the majority of possession. They've got great passes of the ball, like Fabian Schär, like Bruno Guimaraes, but I think when they have to break down the opposition, they're not too comfortable at doing it. I think they much prefer to be the ones who have to sit back, absorb, and then hit on the counter. And then at the same time, they press high and let the other side have the ball, and then press them high into mistakes and capitalize that way. And we saw both styles on Saturday against Arsenal very early on. Press. Second half, we'll just sit back and hit them on the counter, and it worked an absolute treat. It was Newcastle's best performance probably all year, to be quite honest with you. It wasn't one that you'll remember because it wasn't very exciting, but tactically, absolutely perfect. So it's going to be a totally different game on Sunday, and I'm not sure how well Newcastle United will do with it. Dan Burn isn't the worst passer of the ball, but I think if he's been pressed, then he's not too comfortable with it. And it's just whether Newcastle United can adapt to having to have the majority of the ball and finding the space. And I just don't know if they'll be able to do it. It's not a style that I like from Newcastle at this moment in time. But
I think we will press in some areas when certain players have the ball. I think we've done that, like Nick Pope. We probably won't mind pressing him if we're in the right circumstances, and Dan Burn. But yeah, we're not a team we're not like full on chaos. We're going to press high up the pitch. We're more reserved, and it's worked well so far.
And that partnership at the back is really important, isn't it? Between the two centre backs, you know, they're kind of different styles of centre backs, aren't they? But it seems to be working really well.
Yeah, they're massively complementary. You know, obviously, if you go back 10, 15 years, you had Ferdinand and Vidic and Carvalho and Terry. And I'm not saying they're on that level, obviously, but Murillo and Milenkovic have that mould of one will fight for the headers, win the ball, mop up behind Murillo, who will step into midfield. He will step in to try and intercept the ball. But they complement each other. Murillo was so talented last season. People will remember, I guess, him almost scoring against Palace and when he beat 4 players and ran into the box. He's got that about him, but he was a little bit more kind of erratic defensively without that presence alongside him. And Milenkovic has elevated Murillo, and Milenkovic isn't the quickest, but we're not a team that's going to play with a massively high line, so you can cover his weakness there. But yeah, as a pair, we've had this discussion a lot on our podcast, like where would you rank them in Premier League pairs right now? And I think a few weeks ago, I think I said 6th, but as we sit here now, then I'd probably say, off the top of my head, maybe 3rd. That's how well I think they're playing together.
I'm just loving how happy you are, Matt. It's nice to see a football fan being this happy. I mean, I'd like it to be the different weekend and not facing Newcastle United. But from my point of view, when I'm usually this happy about my team, then it backfires hugely. So I am hoping that's going to happen on Sunday from Newcastle's point of view. But yeah, the centre backs are really interesting to watch. I mean, how will they handle someone like Alexander Isak, who's just starting to find his form again? He scored 3 in 3, a tremendous header against Arsenal. But he's still got a bit of a way to go till he gets back to his best. But how will they handle him on Sunday?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a tough one because when he's right on his game, he's so good. And like you say, I mean, he was my FPL captain for the first game. I thought he was going to have a massive season, and he hasn't thus far, but he did. He scored that really good goal against Arsenal. The strikers we faced this season that kind of fit the mould. I mean, they marked Jota very well against Liverpool and Nunes when he came on. Jackson they dealt with at Chelsea, and then Nkunku came on, who's a different mould of player. So I think as a more mobile forward, I think Murillo might take Isak this time. Normally it's been Milenkovic, but maybe they'll task Murillo with marking him. He's very quick, he's very strong. So I'd back him, but obviously Isak's so good to score that goal against Arsenal and to score the amount of goals he did last season, then I wouldn't be at all surprised if Isak got on the score sheet. It's that one area that, because you've got Isak and Gordon, who are so much better than the West Ham players. Like West Ham team's absolute shambles that we beat last week. It makes me more reserved and more concerned. And you know, as you referenced there, I am loving it at the moment. But in previous appearances on this podcast, I've been very down. I think of myself as a realist, as a fan. But so yeah, I'm confident, but not. I'm certainly not overconfident when you look at the quality you've got in attacking areas.
And just going to Chris Wood for a final time, he scored the majority of Forest's goals. Does that concern you slightly, that if he's not on form or if the service isn't coming to him, where do the goals come from?
Yeah, we've had this discussion quite a lot. Like if he gets injured, then touch wood, he won't. That would be a big issue. We've got Tyro Wanyi in reserve, who's been really good for us, but he's had his injury issues, and he's a bit of like our Callum Wilson. Really, he just hasn't been able to stay fit. So if Wood doesn't get on the score sheet, I'd still back us to score. You look at the goals that Hudson-Odoi scored. We've got enough X factor players to score 1 goal, but I don't think we're a team that's going to score. We're not going to score 3 in a match without Chris Wood on the score sheet. So it is an issue, but we've got players who can do something out of nothing, like Hudson-Odoi, like Gibbs-White, like Elanga. Our set pieces are so much better that we've scored from set pieces this season. So yes, it's definitely a concern, but it's not fatal. That it might have been in seasons gone by, but this season there's enough there to still cause Newcastle problems, I think.
And in terms of the Forest view on Newcastle United, how are they viewing this weekend's opposition? Obviously, Newcastle United down in 11th, so a few places behind you guys, but only 4 points off you. It's really tight there between 3rd and 11th place. But how do they view Newcastle United? What's their thinking ahead of Sunday, do you think?
I think speaking they recognise it's a really tough game, certainly, and no one's taking it for granted. I mean, speaking for myself, having watched Newcastle quite a few times this season, like I watched you at the start of the season and thought you were not terrible, but not good, but getting wins. And then I watch you in other games and think, oh, they're playing quite well here. And then they're not winning. And now it feels like it's sort of in the middle ground, but getting more towards the playing well and picking up points. It feels like you're a team that's starting to get momentum. Now you've got good players coming back, and you've got good players on the bench. Like Harvey Barnes is a good player. I'm not sure why he's not in the team, whether it's defensive flaws or whatever. You guys will know better than me. And I really like Joe Willock, who's had his injury problems, but he seems to bring energy to a game and create space for others. So, yeah, I think if we were playing you maybe in 2 or 3 weeks after the international break, then it would be even more tricky, because I think you're a team that's going to get momentum and you're going to challenge, from between 4th and 8th in the table, I'm sure. I mean, if I'm honest, you probably will finish above us. I know that, but as we, right now, it's a really intriguing clash for sure.
I'm not too sure, that might actually happen, because I look at the games that you've played so far. And I know earlier in the show you said you've played some big teams, but you've also played quite a few teams in and around you where maybe many people would have predicted you to have been. Yes, you've played Liverpool, you've played Chelsea, and a couple others, but you're beating the sides that you probably should be looking to beat. And you've got the bigger teams to come. But the important thing is, if you're beating kind of the sides you should be beating, that's a brilliant foundation to have. And Newcastle haven't managed to do that. Drew against Everton, drew against Bournemouth, lost against Fulham. The kind of games where Forest are winning at this moment in time. And of course, things can turn and stuff. But from what I've seen of Forest, and I know it's only 10 games in, I still think they'll be up there. I think they'll be up there battling for the top 6. Towards the end of the season, which is a tremendous achievement. But do you look at this game and say Forest are favourites?
I was looking at odds for goals, and I play a lot of FPL, so I was looking at odds and stuff like that. And Forest are like marginally tipped to score. I think it's like 1.6 goals to 1.3 goals or something. So I think the bookies have us as marginal favourites. Are we favourites? Yeah, probably just on form and where we are in the league. But I mean, I think it's one of these games right now where maybe both sets of fans would take a point and say, thank you very much. Let's go into the international break on a pretty decent note. So yeah, maybe we are slight favourites, but it's very marginal. Like, you can't forget Newcastle are a really strong side. Like, Guimaraes is a really good player. Joel Linton is really good. You've got a lot of talent. I wonder, like, maybe a few players are still off form. I'm sure you discussed Nick Pope on your podcast. Like, it doesn't feel like he's been quite as good as he has been historically. So there's areas that I think we can exploit. But if we are favourites, it's by a very small margin, certainly.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping the win over Arsenal will kickstart Newcastle season, because it's a big period after the international break with West Ham. Then you've got the League Cup coming up as well. So, and a few very winnable fixtures. But yeah, I'll put you down as favourites. But it's funny, because I think a lot of people would say, if Newcastle have real ambitions of being in the Champions League again next season, then you have to be beating teams like Nottingham Forest and kind of forget about the form, forget where Forest are. You have to be beating teams like Forest. But then I said that about Bournemouth, and I said that about Fulham, and it didn't happen. So goodness knows what's going to happen on Sunday. But I said on the match preview, 1-1 is my prediction. So what are you going for, Matt?
Yeah, 1-1 certainly. Yeah, a good shout. I think we're one of those teams that can keep a clean sheet in almost any game now, which I can't believe I'm saying. So I could see us either keeping a clean sheet or conceding 1 goal. So yeah, either 1-1. I mean, I do have a feeling for like 2-1 to us. I know every fan would come on and say their team's going to win. But like we said earlier, I'm not the most optimistic fan. And I do feel like it's a game we might be able to win, maybe 2-1. Like Chris Woods, I just think because it's against Newcastle. I don't always buy into that former club thing, but I think he likes to score against Newcastle, because I don't think fans fancied him that much particularly. I think he does actually love to prove a point, and he's on form. Yeah, and Elliott Anderson's such an interesting factor in the game. He came off the bench last week. He had 30 minutes of action. He created 4 chances, as many as anyone else in the league. In that moment, he set up a goal as well. So he's going to be a big factor. So yeah, I'll go 2-1 Forest, but not like a big arrogant. We're gonna smash you or anything like that. Nothing like that.
There we go. Well, I'm sure it's going to be a very entertaining game. Good one for the neutral to watch. You can follow it through our live blog on chroniclelive.co.uk. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you want to have a bit more of a discussion about Chris Wood, myself and Sam Mulliner did an episode on Wednesday about the sale of Chris Wood from Newcastle United and whether they will now regret that exit. So head back onto the YouTube channel or the podcast audio channel and you will find it. Get into the comments on this video as well. If you agree or disagree with anything I or Matt have said, give a thumbs up on the YouTube channel, hit subscribe, and also leave us a rating and review on the podcast channel. Thank you as always. And for myself, I'll see you guys very soon.